Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see here on our channel, on our website, or on our social media. Reach out to me directly. It's in the description below, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Today, we're discussing a 2019 release. This is the Omega Seamaster Diver 300-meter James Bond edition for the No Time to Die film that, frankly, is held up and postponed like almost everything else in theater this year. But when No Time to Die finally arrives, it'll be the fifth Daniel Craig James Bond, and this watch is both a tribute to that film and a loving throwback acknowledging the 1960s when service-issued Omega Seamasters featured many of the qualities and design characteristics seen here. Make no mistake, this is a nostalgia piece, but it's still a true ISO 6425 diver. It's titanium in contrast to a standard diver 300 meter, though the other measurements, 42 millimeters and from lug to lug, a 50 millimeter dimension, all of those obtained. Because it has a solid case back, it is actually half a millimeter thinner than the standard watch, so without the NATO strap fitted, this would be 13.2 millimeters thick, and the spacing between the lugs is 20 millimeters. Now this watch includes a NATO strap that's nicely color keyed, and we're going to throw this on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference. You can see that NATO straps look good, but they're a little bit idiosyncratic. They contribute somewhat to the thickness or perceived height of the watch on the wrist, though they're feather light and quite comfortable, and this is one of the best NATOs you'll ever encounter. On the strap, I'm not really going to say there's a lower limit for wrist size, because the NATO strap is supposed to dwarf your wrist, so I suppose even if your wrist is 13.5 centimeters on this strap, it's not going to look materially different than it looks on my wrist at 16 centimeters circumference. There's your down the barrel shot. Taking a quick look at the hardware and the software, Omega's NATO straps are always special. You can see this one features the 007 logo and the Omega branding, and like the watch, it's satin finished titanium. A simple, no-nonsense pin buckle to match, and striations that nicely key to the colors of the watch. You can also appreciate the fact that the watch is all of satin finish, so there's no bright work here. Nothing is polished. It's all titanium, satin finished, longitudinal. The crown itself is a screw down 300 meters, water resistant. The helium escape valve is present and correct, and since 2018, you've been able to open this helium escape valve while you were submerged if you need it to release helium gas from your watch while surfacing from a saturation dive. For everyone else, it will be a conversation piece. Now the bezel is where you start to see some of the vintage cues. It has a simulated patina effect. The original bezels would have had an acrylic cover, so with the acrylic over tritium over time, they will age to this tropical-like fade. It's an ecru coloration, and the bezel itself is a sort of brown-black. So the bezel works just as it does on a standard diver 300 meter. Let's have a listen. Which means it has fairly shallow knurling, so not easy to grip while hands are wet, but all other times, the 120 click bezel feels and sounds better than any diver 300 meter bezel I've encountered in previous generations. Line it up with the skeleton style blackened minute hand, and you have a quick 0 to 60 count up timer. Now, this watch does have a dramatically more cambered sapphire than a standard diver 300 meter. Let me see if I can find one of those on hand. There we go. I have an entirely separate James Bond special series. You can see this sapphire is almost flat on a standard diver 300 meter, whereas this one is almost like a bubble. It's designed to reference the plexiglass crystals of Ministry of Defense 165024 1960s Seamaster 300s. The dial, again, like the bezel, is a sort of tropical fade. It's somewhere between brown and black, and you will note there is no date. There's also ecru fade photina on the hands as well as the indices, and there is a Ministry of Defense tri-spoke or chevron down at 6 o'clock. You'll also appreciate the fact that this watch features a solid case back that's designed to reference the originals. Now, not everyone likes solid case backs on luxury watches, but I actually feel between the thinner profile it affords and the fact that the standard Omega 8800 isn't a particularly interesting movement to look at, I think the engraving is actually a little bit cooler. So first of all, you see the Ministry of Defense chevron once again, the James Bond 007 branding. We'll talk about what's inside first. Caliber 8806, which is the 8800 without a date, 35 joules, automatic winding, stop seconds, coaxial escapement. It is a Maytaz master chronometer, almost amagnetic with a silicon hairspring, braced against shock with a full balance bridge and a free sprung index. And of course it does meet the COSC standards, but master chronometer goes beyond that to include power reserve, winding efficiency, anti-magnetism, water resistance, and a 6-position test of chronometry with the watch as a fully cased up timepiece. It beats away at 25,200 vibrations per hour, and it pivots on 35 joules. Again, 55-hour bidirectional automatic winding power reserve. Now the case back, a few features. You could see, obviously, that it's a reference to 1962, and that would have been the year of issue. That's also the year of Dr. No, the first acknowledged real James Bond movie. You can also see issued to 007. You could see 0552, which means this would have originally been a Navy watch, and it makes sense as these were Navy issued in the Royal Navy, but also James Bond being a commander in the Royal Navy, it is fitting. Other details that are worth mentioning, of course, A means screw down crown or dive watch. The 007 once again speaks for itself, and 923 means this is, again, a dive watch. So this is a timepiece that is part of a numbered but not necessarily limited series, and what you can see is each one has individually numbering, but it is not necessarily a limited series of 1,000 or 2,000 or some of the ridiculous numbers like 15,007 that we've seen with the James Bond limited series. It is an evocative, handsome, and fun way to wear a watch that looks quasi-vintage without the fragility, Frankenwatch, counterfeit, and water resistance issues that you find with real vintage watches. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details. And here we are with the extravagantly loomed dial and bezel of the James Bond No Time to Die special edition. Note the minute hand and the bezel pearl are both corresponding bright green.